The stars had not changed. That was the first thing Commander Darien Voss noticed as the Ashbourne dropped out of faster-than-light travel and the Milky Way's ancient light flooded the bridge viewports. The constellations were slightly wrong. 10,000 years of stellar drift had nudged each point of light a fraction of a degree, but the shape of it, the vast cathedral of the galaxy, remained exactly as it had been painted in every archive, every history file, every whispered bedtime story told to children in the cold metal corridors of the generation ships. Home was out there somewhere. What was left of it? "All stations confirm jump integrity," said his first officer, Lieutenant Marin Cole, her voice carefully neutral. She had been raised on the same stories. Every soul aboard had. 18 warships, 12,000 crew, and every single one of them carrying the same wound in their chest, the kind of wound that does not heal, only calcifies into something harder than bone. Darien stood from his command chair and walked to the forward viewport. Behind the glass, space was quiet. Patient. The way predators are patient. "Set course for the Zyrex Dominion's capital world," he said. "Steady speed. Let them see us coming." 10,000 years ago, the Zyrex had come to Earth with fire. Not metaphorical fire. Real fire, planetary-scale incendiary bombardment that turned oceans to steam and continents to glass. High Chancellor Zyrex, whose name had become a title, whose bloodline had stretched unbroken through 100 centuries of dominion, had ordered the burning of humanity's cradle because humans were inconvenient. Because humanity's expansion into the Orion Arm had threatened trade lanes. Because it was easier to erase a species than negotiate with it. They had been thorough. They had been certain. They had been wrong. A handful of ships escaped the burning sky. 7 colony vessels and a single military escort. They carried 40,000 survivors, enough genetic diversity to sustain a species, and something the Zyrex had failed to account for, a purpose. A cold, patient, absolute purpose that would not dim over generations but would instead sharpen, passing from parent to child to grandchild, refined by every telling until it became the organizing principle of an entire civilization. "We will come back. We will remember. We will return what was done to us." They had found a world in the Perseus Arm. They had built. They had suffered and argued and nearly destroyed themselves twice over, but they had endured, because humans are profoundly difficult to extinguish when they have a reason to exist. And what a reason they had carried. The centuries became millennia. The 40,000 became 40 billion. The 7 colony ships became fleets. The military escort's design was studied and dissected and rebuilt again until the original vessel would not have recognized its descendants, sleek, dark, vast things that moved through the void like thrown spears. And at the center of every generation's ambition sat the same 2 words, encoded in the name of every flagship, every military academy, every child born into the officer class. Remember Earth. The Zyrex Dominion's border sensors detected the incoming fleet 3 light hours out. What followed, Darien would later read in the intercepted communications, was first confusion, then amusement, then fear. The signals had traveled inward at the speed of light while his ships traveled at a significant fraction of it, so by the time the Dominion's Defense Command finished composing its first response to the anomaly was already deep inside their outer perimeter. The first Zyrex warships to intercept them were destroyed before they could broadcast a second communication. Not destroyed messily, not the way Earth had been destroyed. Surgically. Precisely. With the kind of mechanical efficiency that comes from 10,000 years of building toward a single moment. Darien watched it on the tactical display with his hands clasped behind his back and felt nothing except a grim, settling certainty. This was not rage. Rage burns hot and then burns out. This was something older and colder, a thing that had been carried so long it had become structural, the load-bearing wall of his entire civilization's identity. Remember Earth. High Chancellor Zyrex the 832nd sat on the obsidian throne of the Dominion when the human fleet entered orbit around the capital world. He was the direct descendant of the Chancellor who had ordered Earth's burning, and he wore that heritage with the comfort of someone who has never been asked to account for the past. He watched the viewscreen as 18 dark vessels arranged themselves in a formation above his world. They were not firing. They were waiting. A communication request came through. He accepted it, because he was curious, and because he was not yet afraid, and because the Zyrex had not been afraid of anything in a very long time. The face on the screen was human. He recognized the species from historical records, soft-featured by Zyrex standards, bilaterally symmetrical, apparently mammalian. The records described them as extinct. The records, he was now forced to admit, had been incorrect. "I am Commander Darian Voss," the human said. "Appointed by the unified human worlds. I am speaking to you today because 10,000 years ago, your ancestor ordered the destruction of our home world. I want you to understand something before this conversation continues." High Chancellor Zyrex leaned forward despite himself. "And what would that be?" "We did not come here in anger," Darian said. "Anger would have been simpler. Anger fades. What we carried was something else, a record. A promise. A debt that your civilization owes to mine, written in the ashes of 3 billion people who died screaming in an atmosphere that was set on fire by your fleet." Silence on the channel. "We have spent 10,000 years becoming something your ancestor did not anticipate," Darian continued. He thought he was erasing an inconvenience. He was, in fact, creating something else entirely. He took a young species and gave it an absolute purpose. He forged us. The Chancellor's mandibles, the Zyrex equivalent of a jaw, worked slowly. "What do you want?" "Accountability," Darian said. "Reparations. A monument on Earth's surface, what remains of it, built by Zyrex hands, maintained by Zyrex resources, for as long as your civilization endures. And a formal acknowledgement, broadcast on every Dominion channel, of what was done and by whom and why it was wrong." "And if we refuse?" Darian was quiet for a moment. He looked at something off-screen. Later, reviewing the footage, Darian would remember that he had been looking at a photograph mounted beside the tactical display. A painting, actually, recreated from a digital file preserved across 10 millennia. Green hills. Blue sky. A white structure of some kind on a cliff top beside an ocean. Earth, as it had been. "Then we demonstrate," Darian said, "that the species your ancestor tried to eliminate has become very, very good at the thing he started." The High Chancellor, to his credit, did not make them demonstrate. The formal acknowledgement went out across Dominion space within 48 hours. It was, according to analysts, the most significant political event in Zyrex history, a ruling chancellor admitting, on record, to a genocide committed 100 centuries prior, and accepting the consequences of it. The monument took 11 years to build. Darian lived to see its foundation laid on the obsidian plains of what had once been the European continent, where the superheated rock still held the faint impressions of a civilization, here a road, there a foundation line, over there the ghost of something that might have been a city square. The Zyrex engineers worked alongside human archaeologists, and if there was tension in those early years, it slowly gave way to something more complicated and more durable. History is like that. The wound does not disappear, but it changes shape. On the day the monument's first section was unveiled, Darian stood on ground that no human had touched in 10,000 years and looked up at a sky that was wrong, too orange, too thin, the air still sharp with chemistry that had not been right in 100 centuries, and felt the weight of the thing he had carried his entire life finally, slightly, shift. Not gone. Not forgiven. Those were not the same thing as acknowledged. He opened a channel to the fleet, to the 12,000 people who had come with him across 10,000 light-years of history, and he said what needed to be said. "This is Commander Darian Voss, speaking from the surface of Earth. We came back. We remembered. We returned the accounting that was owed." He paused. Below his feet, in the black glass ground, He could see his own reflection looking up at him, a human face against an alien sky, standing on the bones of a world. Humanity was burned. Humanity endured. And we are still here. He closed the channel. Above him, the orange sun of a changed Earth climbed slowly into the sky, and for the first time in 10,000 years, there was a human being standing beneath it, casting a shadow on the ground where they had begun.